Hello, welcome to Speech Talk Live. This is episode number 52. My name is Jay Yoza. I'm the host of the show, and my co host is Julie Wu Finkelstein. I'm based out of New Jersey, and we do this show every week to basically talk about speech related topics. We have a discussion on it based on some of the things that we are experiencing or we find interesting that would be helpful to others, and also based on reading the forums on the Coursera course, Introduction to Public Speaking. Julie and I are both mentors for the uh, Coursera's public speaking course. We've been doing this now. As you can see, this is the 52nd episode. And even prior to that, we've been supporting, mentoring students global, all over the world. One of the things that we do based on our availability is it's something that we just, if you notice it on the Coursera forum, I just posted a speech, and this was an interview with one of the student who was still taking the course. Her name is Catherine, and she had to give a high stakes speech at a marketing research association. And we coached her, and then we had her come on and give us an update on what she did as far as her preparation was concerned, what she experienced during the speech, and what she plans to do now that she has given the speech. So if you're in that situation where you have to give a high stakes speech and you want some coaching, let us know. And again, we can't promise you that we'll be able to do it, because again, we can only do very few of these because these are very time consuming, but it's something we make available to those who are taking their public speaking to that next level where they're getting in front of people, and you will need some coaching. So we are available to do that, but you got to give us a lead time. If you know you have a speech coming, typically you need close to 6 weeks. So we're just letting you know. We're available to help you because it can be very scary, and you really need to do a good job because it'll be recorded. It could change your life if you really take it seriously and do a great job. So we do the show basically for that. We're here to help. We're here to learn, and we are also here to improve. That's the idea. And lastly, we're here to support. So that's the purpose of this show. This is really the designed to really help the entire Coursera community and even an extended community for people who are not currently taking the course but who want to improve their public speaking. So today we have 3 segments. The first segment is something that we learned from talking to Catherine, and these are factors that you encounter that are during the speech, a high stakes speech when you're in front of 100 or so people. And these are things you don't have any control over that you do need to think about before you give a speech. That's why it's so important. So we'll talk about that. And this is important because a lot of people do a lot of work and then they find out, oh my God, I didn't know this was going to happen. This was going to happen. And those things do happen. Okay. The second segment is Julie is going to, as we saw last week, she completed her 12 videos for the book that she's writing on 12 stretches to energize yourself to become healthy, happy, and wise. Now she's starting something new, and she's going to discuss this related to how to kind of find your identity and kind of brand it so that people immediately know who you are. You don't have to make them think. So Julie's going to talk about that, what her plans are moving forward with that. So I'm excited to hear about that. And she's recorded 2 companion videos that gives you an idea where she's going with this, okay? And then the third one is, again, a topic that keeps coming, that I keep going back to. It has to do with the selling concept when it comes to speaking. And this time I'm taking this concept that most of us pretty much are familiar with. If you had seen this movie, Glengarry Glen Ross, I mean, there's a YouTube video out there you should take a look at where the guy, I think, forgot the name of the actor, where he puts on the board all ABC. It's a sales concept. It means always be closing. But I don't think people quite understand what that means. So I want to have a discussion around that where I really explain what that means. People dismiss it as like, oh, that's old style sales. It's not old style. It's tried and tested and it works, but it has to be modified. I don't think that concept has ever been explained properly. I'm hoping we can do that with this discussion and the video that I've recorded. So that's the show for today. And for my insight, I'm going to talk about something that comes up a lot when somebody is on a podcast or any kind of show where somebody will ask them like, hey, what book do you recommend? You know, people who are successful read a lot. They have a very extensive reading list. And I was thinking about this actually when I went for my walk yesterday, that if somebody asked me that question, what book would I recommend? And I have like so many books. There isn't any one book that I could ever recommend, because reading is like you pick up things from one thing, another thing, and you kind of create a composite of what you are thinking about. There's no one book that does it. But if you have to pick a one book, the answer is, to me, is quite obvious. You have to pick the Bible. And the reason is not necessarily even religious. I'm not a Christian, but I would pick the Bible because Bible is the book that's most referenced. And there is a lot of useful stuff in the Bible. Like one day I started reading the Bible. I think I only got past the first chapter, Adam and Eve. I mean, that's as basic as it gets. And even then I saw like there's so much here. I don't think I could ever finish this book. So I would say that if you want to pick that one book that's going to, have the biggest payoff in your life, I would say the Bible. And then after that, then you can decide what other books out there are going to help you. But there is a lot in this one book, okay? And I haven't even gotten through the first chapter. One day, if I have time, I'd like to go through it and see how it applies to my daily life. Like I said, I'm not Christian, but I'm not going to read it as a, like faithfully. I'm going to read it critically on what it's teaching me. And I think for that, the book is highly valuable. And it's the book that I would pick as and if there's a second book out there, I would pick Plato's Republic. Those are the two books. If you cover those two books, you pretty much have covered 80 to 90% of everything you need to know. Anyway, that's my insight for the day. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Julie to introduce herself, and then we'll get started with our first segment. Julie?
Well, good morning, Jay. Thank you. And congratulations to you for your dedication and your commitment and to reach the 1 year milestone for this Speech Talk Live. I think it's a really significant milestone. So power to you. Power to you. Yeah, so let's see who I am. I think that's a really great question. So today I would like to say that, and I think I need to work on it, but in the talk there was some 3 questions. So what are my talents and my strengths? So I'm going to answer that, and what are my passions, and then something I like to talk about. So my talent, I think, is a lot of intuition, empathy, and creativity. My strength is lots and lots of business experience and systems experience and a wide perspective. I am really passionate about helping people be authentic and successful and happy. Because I think you cannot be happy without being successful or authentic. So my new project is about that. And what I love to do is to learn and to experiment and to collaborate. So I frequently come off like I don't know what I'm doing. And that's generally true because I'm always trying something I don't know. But in this work of identity, I would like to say, I'm unusual in that I carry with me a huge body of experience and work. As for insight for today, so please check out my site. I have some free activities that you can always plug into. I'm working on this concept called streaming. is providing services to people that is unconditional, that's always available, that is moment per moment, and you can give and receive. And that's a very and this so there's always going to be a free aspect of my activities with the group, with the people in large, but I also think that money is the main question. So today I want to actually, it's interesting that Jay is talking about a book. So today I want to bring 3 books into a kind of a perspective. One of them is, well, one of them is not a book. One of them is a webinar that Jay shared with me, which was Linda Formichelli's talk on how to do everything. She's a book publisher, and she's publishing a book, and she talks about life and book and all that interesting work. The next one is called, and I don't even remember these people's names, or there's Linda Formichelli. I actually do. The next book I like to talk about is a book called The 10% Entrepreneur, and that is by this guy called Patrick McGinnis, and he's a famous entrepreneur, made a lot of money, and there's a Google talk on him talking about the book, The 10% Entrepreneur. And the third one is by this guy called Stephen Case. I didn't recognize the name, and the title of his book is called The Third Way, an Entrepreneur's Vision of the Future. I pick up on the Topless book, The Third Way, which is a classic. So these books form like a common intersection, or the commonality is basically there is something inside you that can come out. You can do it. You can do it by yourself. You can do it on a part-time, and it's the idea of innovation and creativity to work on some major projects in your life, even when you don't have time. And the key to that is to get started. Okay, so one of it is in the 10% Entrepreneur, they talk about just putting aside some part-time and work on that. And in Linda's book, she talks about the side castle or the sand castle, where you're building little pieces. And in the 10% Entrepreneur, it really talks about you can do that part-time. So I don't think that it has to be about money, but I think there is something that's like a running theme in your life. And if you create a project or activity, the inside and the outside manifest together. And the key for that, I think, is a binder. If you have a binder and you start keeping information in there over decades, over years, you will be amazed what gets collected, because the binder serves as a bank. And I'll talk about more, but underlying this need for creativity in today's world is the information age is allowing us a very low entry point, in the sense that it doesn't take too much money, it doesn't take too much time, and you can get started. And the information is available now, the technology is available, you can do very little bit and start doing step by step. So I'll continue to investigate this theme. The next major project I'm doing, which is a piece of that major theme, is finding your identity, creating identity of the talents you already have, to message that, to create messages, and then to brand yourself with that, and then to keep practicing that, which is a 4-step process, either finding or creating your identity of your strengths and what your passions, creating messages, which I will use Jay's hacking techniques or some form of that. Messaging that is applying that in real life situations, job interviews, talking to your friends and family, making speeches, business meetings, networking events. And then the fourth one is just keep practicing, because the scope is so wide, you can only take a little drop of water, but it changes the color of the pool that you're in if you keep on dropping water in there. So that's my little speech today. So my insight. So I hope that's useful. Thank you, Jay. And thank you, everybody.
Yeah, that was good, Julie. Just want to comment on one thing. Yeah, that part that you said that sometimes you come across like you don't know what I'm doing, which I think is actually a positive, because I'm actually reading a book. I forgot the name of it. It has to do with confidence, and it completely changed my perspective on confidence. It's written by a professor. I forgot his last name is kind of hard to pronounce. His an Argentinian last name, Thomas something Pernick or something like that. I'll get you the name. And he has done a lot of research in this field. And what he says is that, people in especially in America, where they always try to tell, oh, you got to be confident, you got to be confident. And what he's saying in the book is that no, if you have low confidence, that'll make you much more realistic, and you are going to take care of the situation rather than being overconfident and be delusional. So I think what you just said, it's a strength that you don't know what you're doing, in a sense that you're willing to listen to others and you're also willing to learn. If you already knew what you're doing, then you'd say, what can Jay teach me? What can I learn from somebody else? So that is your strength, by the way, if you think like that. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, which is a good way to approach things, because you don't. I mean, there's just so much out there that other people know that you just don't know. And I think that's how Socrates used to think, right? Like, I can learn from anybody. So you're like Lady Socrates there.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay, so at this point, we can go on talking about this. We'll talk about this more when we get to your segment. So at this point, let me take a brief pause and we'll move to our first segment. Okay, welcome back to Speech Talk Live. This is episode number 52. My name is Jay Oza. I'm the host of the show, and my co-host is Julie Wu Finkelstein. In this first segment, we're going to talk about something that typically people that are professionals know about, which is that there are certain aspects of speaking, there may be more than 4, that are really outside your control. When you are trying to become a good or confident or whatever word you want to use, a speaker, where you're going to get in front of a large audience, let's say more than 100, and you're going to give a speech, you're just focused on the speech, and you just want to get it done, and then that's it, right? You're not thinking that far ahead. And one of the things that what I talk about in this companion video is that there are other things you have to think about, because your success of your speech is not necessarily going to be all that prep work you did. Audience, they don't care about the prep work. They only care about what you're doing at that particular moment. It's very moment specific, not based on like you as far as your preparation, that's yours, right? You have to perform when you're in front of the audience. So there are 4 things that a lot of times we just don't think about that can completely affect how your speech is perceived by the audience. First is, of course, the audience. You really need to know about them. And you remember, if you're at an event, the audience is there now for quite some time. What do they really know, and what do they want to know? And the tendency always is that when you are expert in a topic, you want to go in and just impress the hell out of them with how much you know. And that's a mistake you don't want to make. So always remember that you want to give them maybe one thing, and that's it. Don't give them more than one. If you want to give them another thing, then you can use my the hedge ox principle and go with the 60-30-10 principle. But I would just say that if you can give them one thing that they can take away, then you have achieved your objective. And then if they're interested, they can come back to you. So you really have to look at the audience and what they're going through, not in their life, but at that event. And a lot of times we just don't do that. We just think like, oh, they're going to be so impressed with listening to your speech. And in reality is that they don't even care. They're not going to remember much anyway, especially if there are lots of other speakers that are speaking and if they've been there that event for 1 or 2 days. So the audience is important, and the key thing that I'll tell you here is don't err on giving too many details. Details are not important. Give them like one thing that they can take away from your speech. The second one is the time aspect of it. And here's something that we just recently saw with one of the person that we were coaching. She had a 45-minute time, and she was not able to finish the speech, and they had to stop her at the time. And what you want to do in any speech you give is to give people time back. Nobody's ever going to get angry and said, oh man, Julie gave us 5 minutes, she finished 5 minutes early. Believe me, nobody's ever going to scream at you for doing that. And that means that when you're practicing your speech, you really want to come in. So let's say it's a 45-minute speech. Your speech should be so tight that you can end it at 35 minutes when you're practicing. Because most likely when you're actually when you're giving the speech, you're going to run over anyway. So let's say you run over by 5, you're still going to finish at 40-minute mark, and you're giving them 5 minutes. You're going to give them 5 minutes back. They're going to be happy. You never, ever you always want to try to get your speech done at least 5 to 7 minutes early. And then if there are questions, you take them. Otherwise, you're done. Because you gave them only 1 point. That's what that's the takeaway that you want to give them. So you don't have to feel bad like, oh, I have to use up every single minute. You don't. Our audience doesn't really care. In fact, they'll be happy. The other thing always is a trap is like entertainment versus content. That's a spectrum, right? If you go to an event and if it's a stand-up comedian, it's all going to be on the entertainment side because that's what you're going for. And if you're going to a specific workshop on a specific aspect of a topic on, let's say, if I was giving a talk on speaking, storytelling to techies, computer or something very specific, at that point, the people that are going to be there are going to be people who know exactly what they're going to get attending that workshop, let's say. So that's on the right end of the spectrum where the topic is very specific and very detailed, okay? But most of the time you're in between. And here you have to be very careful depending on so many factors, the audience, the venue, what time you're giving. And you have to calibrate it. Do you want to go, so let's say using the football terminology, 50-yard line, put you right in the middle, partly entertainment, partly content driven, right? If the audience is at a particular, let's say if it's late in the day, then you want it to be more entertainment. If it's early in the morning, you probably want it to be a little bit more content heavy since you're the first speaker and the audience can probably have not been, your brain has not been fried yet with listening to a lot of different speeches. So you've got to be able to know all that, and you got to be able to do it quickly. Sometimes you do know ahead of time when you're speaking, but sometimes things can happen where a previous speaker has gone over, and now you have to suddenly make these decisions on the fly, and you have to be prepared. Otherwise, you're going to be affected. Your speech is going to be affected. And the last thing I'll just mention is the venue. This is very important. If you're just one speaker out of many, your speech is just essentially a filler speech. An audience is basically getting a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and that's what you want to give them. Just a little bit of what the audience is there to get. They're not there to just come to listen to your speech alone. If that's what they're there for, then they will come to your workshop. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind, that they're not there just to listen to your speech. Unless you're giving a keynote, then it's a different matter altogether. But even then, I don't think people go there to listen to just one speech. That might draw them in. At the end, the point is add value. Add value based on things that are unforeseen that can happen when you're giving a speech. This is a little bit of an advanced topic because a lot of times we talk about the preparation side, but these are things you also have to prepare for what can happen at when you are actually giving a speech at an event, things that you have not thought about that could adversely affect your speech. Julie, you have any comments on this? And how would you handle it?
Yeah, Jay. So, yeah, you mentioned audience. I think it's really key that what they know already and what they want to know. I think that drives our audience participation, and that's like empathy, right? And I think that in today's videos that you'll be commenting, I really didn't think about that. So I think that is so important. And I think you used the term avatar, and we said maybe it's more archetype. Is perhaps you can create, perhaps before we give a speech or even a business strategy, is that we need to start thinking about who is our consumer archetype. And there may not be one when we started, but I think what you're giving us is like a good checklist of things to think about. And then again, if you have that binder, you could have a section, and each of these ideas could be at one page, so people can start jogging ideas on it. In terms of how much time, as I was working with the person, and I am actually exploring that myself a lot, is unbundling and rebundling, or packaging or repackaging. I think it's a great idea to give them one message, but maybe in the one message there's like 3 or 4 blocks, and so then you want to be able to plug and play the blocks. So for example, if there's 3 messages, you can tune in and say, oh, I'm taking so much time with the first message, the 60%, I might drop off the last message. So to design a speech so that there's flexibility on where to drop off a piece, modularity in designing the speech, I think it's really helpful for help people to maintain the time, because as a beginning speaker, it's very hard to judge the time. So I agree that you can't control it, but I think there's a way for you to be adaptable and respond to that. Effective style, again, I like to be the devil's advocate and say, instead of looking at it as a single line and you have entertainment and information as like one single dimension, what if you put it in like an X and Y, like a dimension? Where would you locate yourself? So is there a possibility for someone to be 100% entertaining and 100% content rich? Or do they really just need to be 50-50? Where are they and what's their style, and work with that. But it's very true. I was a founder of the Midwest SQL users group, which is the relational database that's still currently the main technology. And I don't think I knew that. It would have been much more helpful for me had I known this information. And location, again, like you said, I'm personally taking the idea of doing online stuff, but the physical location and face-to-face is a very important factor in any human relationship. So knowing what the location is and how hot and cold it is, how if it's a spa environment, then people are not really there to be educated. They might want to take some creative ideas, but it's more of a relationship and stuff like that. So I think those 4 ideas are great, and maybe you're going to put together a worksheet for us. Thank you very much. That's it.
Yeah, Julie, thanks a lot. That was an excellent message there on some of the things that you said. Yeah, the whole point of this is that there may be more here that I haven't included. So I think you're right. I'll add a checklist on these are the things. But I think the main point here is this, that we don't allocate time when we're working on our speech for these things. We have to know ahead of time. And again, I understand that many of us are not professionals who go and give a lot of speeches. So these are things that we don't think about. Even in at companies, you have to go and give a speech. You're so focused on the speech itself that you don't think about going there ahead of time, getting comfortable with the room, exactly where you're going to move, how you're going to move it, what kind of technology you're going to deal with it. Because you run into situations where people have all kinds of issues with, I don't know, that's if you're using PowerPoint, but if you're using PowerPoint, you need to know how you're going to pull it off. And all of these things have to be rehearsed so that I think there's a point here that I didn't make in my video, which I'll make now. And it's something I think you say. I think you said in the last week's video, that Speech Talk Live that we did. When you are in front of an audience, the audience doesn't really get to know they know the content or what you're saying through you. Part of your job is to look like you're under control with how you move, how you deal with the situation, how you use your voice, how you use your gestures. Because if you don't look like you're under control, then your content is either look like is too difficult for them to understand, or they dismiss it outright saying, oh, this person is not making us comfortable. And that is the key thing, what I'm trying to tell in this these factors, that if you don't think of these factors, then what is likely to happen is that you're not going to make the audience comfortable. And if they're not comfortable, they just will not pay attention to you, and they will not think of you as a thought leader because you're not giving them that comfort. And that comfort has nothing to do necessarily with your content. It's how you present yourself, as far as are you attuned to the venue? Are you attuned to the entertainment versus content richness? These are the time. Are you ending the speech early? These are all the things that the audience do pick up, and you've got to be prepared to handle that. Anyway, any closing thoughts on this, Julie, regarding the comfort, being comfortable?
Yeah, I think comfortable is a more operating word for me than control, but certainly be comfortable, be responsive, which is what you talk about a lot in some previous talks, is to connect with the audience. Part of your control is not to be rigidly controlled, but to be comfortable and responsive and flexible. So I think that's those 4 key points are great. I look forward to more insight from you on them. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Julie. Yeah, and you're right. There's a lot we can discuss, but at least I got it started. That these are some of the things that we do have to think about when we are giving a speech. Because I think up to this point, we have focused a lot on getting the speech done. But now we're moving on to the next phase, as this is our 52nd episode, where people are, in order for, we've seen some examples where people have actually gone in front of an audience, and we have to convey to them that you better allocate a week so that when you're on that stage, you're under control, you're comfortable, because that's how that content is being perceived by them. All right, Julie, thanks a lot. At this point, I'll take a brief pause and we'll move to our second segment. Okay, welcome back to Speech Talk Live, episode number 52nd. My name is Jay Oza. I'm the host of the show, and my co-host is Julie Vu Finkelstein. In this second segment, Julie is going to talk about a series of videos that she's going to be recording, as she just completed her 12 video series on 12 stretches to energize yourself, to make you happy, healthy, and mindful. And here she's going to focus on, assuming you already did those 12 stretches, now it's time to, or integrate it as part of your practice. Now it's more about, who are you? Like, how do people perceive you? But how do you want people to perceive you? So she's going to go into kind of find yourself, what your identity is, so that you can brand yourself. So when people see you, you want to make sure they're seeing you the way you want them to see you. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julie, where she talks. She's recorded two companion videos for this, and she will start talking about some of the practices that she's currently doing that can help us. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Julie to talk more about her pivot and what she's going to be doing for the next several weeks, and discuss some of the two of the videos that she has recorded. Julie, why don't you take it over?
Thanks, Jay. So just first off, I'd like to say I'm going to keep this relatively short so you can give me plenty of time for feedback. I am going to restart this whole series again next week. So what I'd like to get feedback from you is anything you like. But in terms of as an online speech, I did record them multiple times, but as you can see, I was not comfortable. There were many ums and ahs and disconnects in the videos, and that is because I'm still playing with the idea as well as the message. And I'm actually using the speech as a part of my refinement tool for my strategy and my message, as well as the tool for you to give me feedback on the message itself, on the public speaking aspects of it. In terms of public speaking, I really like the format that we came up with, which I came up with, which is 5 minutes for the idea, a video on 5 minutes for an idea, and then 5 minutes. Before it was demo, but now I'm going to call it practice or demo. So some of these things are not demonstratable, but we can talk about a practice. So given that this is a weekly show, people can take this idea and literally practice for 7 days, and they may find it very, very useful. The basic theme, as I mentioned, is looking for, this is a pivot between the 12, I like what you said, 12 stretches, 12 energy stretches for health and happiness, something like that. It's talk about building a physical foundation of well-being, because if you're not healthy, you ain't going anywhere. But there are certain practices that is useful no matter what you want to do in life. You know, you can call them meta practices, practices for practices, but they're kind of like the underlying fabric of everything. So in this pivot, I'm trying to identify those practices, and they were written in the first draft of the book. I'm thinking about pulling them out and creating a separate book. Because they are like modules, you know, part of the modular design. And so, yeah, and then the 5-minute practice session, I just came up with the idea that perhaps it could be a half an hour workshop video I can do where there's a 5 minutes of practice, let people do it, and then somehow bring some kind of closure into it, either through schedule or through email response. So playing with that. So I'm open to totally for your feedback, since I'll have a complete redo next week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like what you're doing here, because I think it's very practical, and it dovetails nicely to what you did the 12 weeks, because I think the message here is that first you got to be, like you just said, you got to be healthy, you got to feel good. Otherwise, if you don't have something to relieve stress, then it could, stress is always there. There's a good stress and a bad stress. But if you don't have exercises to relieve stress or to manage stress, then this is going to overwhelm you to the point where you're not going to be productive and unhappy. So I like the way that this is following once you went over those 12 stretches, so that you can go back to that and feel good about yourself. You're healthy, happy. Now you're healthy, happy. Now that once you're happy, now it's time to do things that'll make you successful in something because you're already happy, rather than the other way around. Like, I think there's a lot of research that backs that up. One of the things that I think you mentioned in your video, I like the way you talk about your passion. What is important to you. What are your strengths? Kind of do an inventory of what your strengths are, what your experiences, a talent. I think one thing I would add to that, what's your interest? Because something has to really, I don't know, maybe that's passion, maybe that's why.
Yeah, that's passion.
Passion, right? Because your interest is very important. Like, what are you interested in? Something that you think about all the time. This is what I'm really interested in, and it could be that So I like that. That's good. And then the part that I didn't quite understand, which I'd like you to elaborate further on, is okay. Two things. One is you're saying that you have to create a binder, right? Now that's fine, but the question I have is, somebody who nowadays everybody is very much into using their smartphones, or unless there's a specific reason why you want people to use a binder, something that they can actually physically have to write it, so it's coming right from their brain, or is the binder concept key to this, or can this be done using some app, let's say some app that's out there that'll allow one to do this? The second question is, it's the last one when you say, when you go through for the third step, when you talk about whether spiritual, health, philosophy, etc., and then you say something practical. I don't know. I didn't get that. What? Give me I need an example of what does that mean?
Oh.
And how is this tying to what you are? Because I think you kind of gave us an idea of this is what you should do, but what aspect of this you're doing personally that as an example, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, thanks, Jay.
We need to see that, like your strength. I think you kind of mentioned it in the intro here about your IT background, etc. But I think we need to see how this relates to you, because this is all about a method that's working for you, and I need to see how it's working for you so I can use it for myself and maybe tweak it and make it work for me. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks, Jay. Yeah, so the categories, I probably have way too much information in both of the videos. So one of the things I need to do is unpack it and pause it. So one of the ways for us to kind of move forward in our lives in a balanced way is figure out the categories. So Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People have a different set of categories than I have. And so what I really should do is saying how to have a holistic life is find your categories. And the categories that I have were my own personal categories. And practical is something I'm weak on because my husband tends to be very, very talented and resourceful, and so I've let that atrophy. So one of the things I do to be more practically engaged in daily life is I have a reading action partner in reading, and we read current events because it helps me to figure out more practical things. I do a daily timesheet. Those are things, there's nothing poetic about it, but it keeps me grounded into everyday life. That's what practical meant for me. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, right. So, another question I had there had to do with this whole binder concept that you introduced. Does it have to be a binder, or is there a reason? Because one thing I didn't understand was that are you kind of like saying that this only will work well with the binder? Is that what you are seeing? And are there apps out there that will allow me to do it? Because some people may not be, for them, binder means a lot of work. Like I got to keep a binder, whereas apps, they can use it anywhere. So with the binder, they got to take it with them. And sometimes that creates its own problems. So I just wanted you to explain that.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I have both. Actually, I have a three-tier system. I have an online folder, right, of all these categories or some relationship to these categories. And then I have a binder, and I also have a folder, with the expandable files. So I think it's really good to have at least an online function and a physical binder. And the online function is great because, like you said, we do so much online now. The physical binder is very important because, we all know about neuromuscular physiological impact of doing something. There's a kinesthetics to it. And also, you may be collecting scraps of paper. So a binder is a great organizer. So I have binders, but I tossed away many of them. But I have binders for the last 20 years. So there's certain things that unless I guess you can take a picture and scan it and keep it all online. I imagine some people do that. But there's some aspect of the process that just requires, like when you're doing brain maps, right? You can do it online, but there's something physically useful to do it on paper. So I guess for people who are foreign to the idea of hard copy, they could do it on paper and take a scan and put it in there. I don't know. Personally, I have both, and so.
You're right. No, that's good. So one thing I will, if I take this as one thing I would add, this would be something that I was telling my son. It's some concept I picked up from, I think his name is Tim Ferriss. He has written several books, and he's viewed as, he's a real productivity guy. He looks at how things are making him more productive and improve at things. And one of the things he mentioned, I think one of the podcasts I might have been listening to, and it's something that he was saying that his ex-girlfriend gave it to him as like a present. And it was a jar, and it said a jar of awesomeness. And what it meant was that every day there's something that you're doing that you need to capture, because occasionally you'll hit a valley where you're kind of stuck. And this will give you an opportunity to go back. Like, let's say you're writing. Every day something you write that you think, wow, today I came up with this great thought, like what you're doing here with this this concept right here on finding and branding yourself. By recording that video, that's pretty awesome, because you did something that a lot of people out there just don't do. They write it down, put it in a jar. But in this case, it could be another binder category where you can just put every day, like today I accomplished this, I read this book. Now, and it may not sound like a lot, but sometimes when you're like completely stuck, you can go back to that and look at it and saying, wait a second, wow, I did accomplish a lot when I look at all the stuff that I have done. And that adds up to a lot, that you're successful. So it's like capturing your small wins and rather than just dismissing it, saying like, it's no big deal. Well, it may not be a big deal when you're doing it because you're thinking of, it's only big deal if I read the book and give a speech on it. That's a big deal. But if you just read a book and come up with some topics that you turn it into a speech, that's a big deal. That's a good small win that you want to keep track of. So that's something that I would add, and it's something that I'm going to give my sons a band that they can put there, because they're going to have a band camp in August, so that people can put in with the index card every time they do something well. Anyway, it's a thought that I had that I thought would be something.
That's great. Maybe you and I can do a discussion panel, just you and me, on that topic.
Yeah, we can record that.
Let's do that. Let that be our first interview.
Yeah, right. Because I have to start working on that. I don't have the jar here, but it's something that because every day okay. So here's the thing: when we finish the show, we don't put that as an awesome thing we did today, but we should because that is awesome. That
Yes.
you gave up, you prepared for this, I prepared for this. Now we came together and we put the show together. Now other people can benefit from it. In my opinion, this is a small win that you and I both are part of. That we should say, and we have these 52 shows that we have done. That's a 52 awesome things that we have done together, and that can't just be dismissed and said, "Oh, it's nothing." It is a lot of things, okay? Because when you do 52, that adds up to one big BFD, I guess, BFT or something. Okay, so at this point, let's close this out. Any closing thoughts on it? But I think this is going to be a continuation that we're going to be talking about, right?
That's great. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so let me just take a brief pause. Otherwise, we could talk about this forever, but we are going to at a later date. At this point, we're going to take a pause and move to our third segment. Okay, welcome back to Speech Talk Live. This is episode number 52nd. My name is Jay Oza. I'm the host of the show, and my co-host is Julie Wu Finkelstein. In this third segment, we're going to talk about this thing when you're giving a speech, selling versus telling, right? It sounds simple, but we often forget. There's a selling part and then there's a telling part. And when you're giving a speech, think selling, not telling, okay? And this is really a difficult concept. I think I included too many things in this companion video. So I'm just going to briefly kind of explain it because sometimes after you record the companion video, you get some feedback and you realize that there are things that you understood it, the other people didn't, and it was maybe not clear. So the first concept I used in there was something called ABC, and ABC is a sales concept that stands for always be closing. Now, many people, when they hear about that, they think of that, that's an old way of selling. That's from that Glenn Ross movie, where they put on the board, always be closing, and AIDA, right? AIDA. These are all sales concepts, but they've been tried and tested. Everything we do is that, okay? People don't like it. Now, what they don't like is, let's say you went to buy a car. What they don't like about this ABC is that the person is trying to get you to purchase a car. They want you to leave that showroom. They don't want you to leave till you've actually purchased the car. That's not what I mean by ABC here, okay? That's what gives ABC a bad name. In every interaction, whatever it is, whether it's a networking interaction, social, whatever, you are always trying to close something. So the example I give is, let's say, hypothetical example, you're at A and the endpoint is Z. Your immediate close is not Z, it should be B, because you can't get to Z unless you go through A, B, C, D, all the way up to Z. The final close should be the second last, should be when you're at Y. When you're at Y, then the final close is the Z. Now, this is kind of a trivial example I'm using. Of course, you're not going to have 26 steps like that. But if it's that many steps, you have to realize what is the next realistic close that you have, okay? So if you're at a networking event, let's say I meet Julie, my immediate close, I have to go in. What is my close here? My close is not to get her to come in saying, hey, Julie, I can coach you for your next speech. That, I think, is really makes me look like I'm kind of sleazy, okay? That's not the close you want. What I want is like an incremental close, saying, hey, Julie, I got a couple of videos that I'm going to send you to take a look at, see what you think. And that is doable. That's not too burdensome. So I'm kind of building a relationship. It's like a small close. It's like kind of you walking up the ladder. But the fact is that you have to close something. Otherwise, you're just telling, right? Because if you're not selling, then you're telling. Selling has a close. Telling doesn't, because you don't care. So whenever you're giving a speech, think of yourself as there has to be a particular close that you want in that speech that's realistic and that's doable. And when you're telling, that brings up another concept that has to do with the frame. Now, frame is how you see the world based on your experiences, your knowledge, your talent, whatever, your education. That's the frame. We all have our frames. And one of the things that happens is that when you're selling, your frame isn't important, even though it's hard. This is what makes selling so difficult. It's the audience's frame. So if you have a large audience, then you have to look at the collective frame. How do they see the world? And you have to enter that frame and see how far you can move them, not all the way to where you want to get them. How can you move them a little bit? And that's all realistically you can achieve. You can't. What happens in many cases is that you don't know what the audience frame is. You only care about your frame. At that point, you're telling people. And that just usually hardly ever works. So that's the concept between, there are several concepts that are kind of mixed in here. ABC, selling versus telling, but they're all kind of related in a way. The whole purpose of this is that when you're giving a speech, you want to close something. What is the close that you want to realistically you think you can achieve? And that's what you want to focus on. So that's why I use the word ABC, because when I was thinking about it, I said, this concept has never been explained properly to people. And it always makes people look like that if you're trying to sell, you have to be somewhat sleazy. And I said, that's not really the point, because if you're not selling, then what's the other alternative? That means you're telling. And telling is just as bad as, it's even worse than selling. Selling isn't bad as long as it's incremental. You're not trying to get them to get to the end point, saying, hey, unless you buy my product, I don't want to have anything to do with you. Then you are sleazy. Then it's very transactional, and that's not what I'm talking about here. Julie, do you have what's your take on this concept between selling versus telling and ABC?
Yeah, Jay. Yeah, it's a great idea. Actually, in the book, the 10% entrepreneur, they always talk about you want to bring up money as soon as possible. You don't want to leave it to the end. So it's parallel in the concept, in this idea that you want to be incremental. And when you close, there's going to be talk about money. So yesterday, I had a business meeting and I brought up money. So I said, if we do make money, it has to be a revenue sharing. And she said, of course. But in the past, I would never bring it up. So that was your talk. I walked your talk, and it was very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I think money is definitely important. But I also would be, depending, I don't know the context of if this came up on the first meeting or this was after several meetings, because I think money is not something, I know this is, I'm kind of torn on this. Sometimes should I bring it up? Should I not bring it up on the first meeting or not? I think you should not go into specific about money. So I'll give you an example. For example, I'm going to have a talk with somebody soon regarding for my book. And one thing I realized something, which is like, what do I want, right? Because when you're talking to somebody, you got to know what you really want. And the one thing I was thinking about is the financial terms. And I came up with something interesting, which I never gave much thought to. And it's something I learned from talking to this other consultant, Nancy, is that you never really want to get sucked into an hourly rate. You want to be, price has to be based on the project with a deliverable. Because I really don't care how many hours you spend on something. If you're not efficient at what you do, that's not my job to know about it. Like, oh, it's going to take you 3 hours to read it. I want the price. If you can't give me a price on based on project, then I'm not interested. I don't want to know like, oh, this is going to take me 5 hours. Don't mention your hours. Hours is something you control. I just want to know about the deliverable that I get for the money. If it means that it's going to be very expensive, then tell me right up front that this is going to cost you $500 or $600 or $1,000. And at that point, I have to decide whether I want to work with you, whether I see any value in you, right? So I've decided that in any future people that I work with, I will never pay per hour. As soon as they bring up hourly rate, I'm not going to pursue that, because that's not something I should worry about. I just need to know what that person can get my project done and what the deliverable is. So anyway, I think selling is a very important concept in everything we do, whether it's a one-on-one interaction or whether it's a business interaction. And you got to think about, again, this ties into what we talked about in our first segment, things that are outside your control, and you do need to think about the how are you conducting the business, and that also shows you how much you're under control. Julie, any closing thoughts?
I think this is a very interesting discussion again. So I look forward for you making a video so we can continue the discussion.
All right, great, Julie. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I think at this point we're pretty much done. Anything that you want to bring up on the earlier segments that you didn't get a chance, that now suddenly you thought about, that you want to kind of discuss before we close the show out?
No, great show. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, Julie, thanks a lot. Let me thank you for participating in the show. And at this point, let me just tell people that public speaking is hard. As you can see, there are a lot of things you have to think about, but you do have to think about these things, because one speech can make a difference in your life, your career, relationship. So you got to keep on working on this. And what we try to do in the show is to bring up these things so that you can see that these are very important topics. But one thing is certain: speaking is something that you control. And that's what we're trying to bring out on this Speech Talk Live, that these are things that you can practice. You have a video camera, you know exactly what you look like, you know exactly what you sound like, you know exactly how comfortable you are when you're giving a speech. And the more you do it, the better you're going to become. I mean, it's this concept of confidence and competence. You can't just fool your way into being confident. You've got to know what you're doing. And that's through practice. And that's something that Julie is going to be going into in more detail. So at this point, I'd like to close this show out. And this was a big milestone. We reached our 52nd episode. And one of the things we had discussed is next week we're going to do an assessment on where we are with this Speech Talk Live. But one thing we did prove as we are closing this show out, that we were consistent. We've been doing this now for an entire year. And I want to thank Julie for all our help, because it wouldn't have been the same with just myself doing it, talking to you. And little by little, we are adding value to people as the feedback that we get. And and whether people out there watch it or not, it doesn't matter. As long as it's helping me, it's helping Julie. That's all we care about. And if the rest other people, it's helping them, great. We want to hear from you. Okay, at this point, that's a wrap, and we'll see you for the next show, the 53rd episode.